Hello and welcome to Big Picture. I am Vishal Dahiya and today we will talk about South Asian Speakers Summit. Now, 4th South Asian Speakers Summit was held in Maldives on 1st and 2nd of September with focus on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The summit was attended by senior lawmakers from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Indian delegation to the summit included Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla, Rajya Sabha Deputy Chairman Harivansh and Secretary Generals of both houses. At the end of the summit, Malé Declaration was adopted, which included commitment to work collectively on promoting equality at work, nutrition, food security, and overcoming challenges and utilizing opportunities to strengthen the regional agenda for delivering on Paris Agreement. During the summit, Indian delegation also foiled an attempt by Pakistan to raise bilateral issues at this forum. For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests today in the studio. Let me start by introducing these guests to you. Mr. Shekhar Rajya, a senior journalist with us, somebody who has kept a close watch on what exactly happens in Parliament and parliamentary democracies as well. We also have with us Mr. Chakshu Roy, Head of Outreach from PRS Legislative, and Mr. V.K. Agnihotri, former Secretary General of Rajya Sabha, is also with us. Let me begin with you, Chakshu, to try and understand, there are several forums wherein the parliamentarians from all countries interact with each other, and there are several meetings which are held as well. But this particular one, that is the South Asian Speakers Summit, this was the 4th one which was held. What is the significance of this particular summit?
Vishal, I think, any opportunity for parliamentarians, especially, presiding officers to meet at an international forum where they can exchange ideas is a welcome opportunity. The Indian Parliament has been participating at the Speaker Summit, which is organized by the Inter-Parliamentary Union, and this Speaker Summit specifically looks at the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the reason this summit becomes important, both for us from a South Asia perspective and from the perspective of the Indian Parliament, is one, because the excellent work done by our Parliament when it comes to Sustainable Development Goals, we are able to share that with parliaments in our neighborhood, and also get to know as to what are the different things that other parliaments are doing in respect to Sustainable Development Goals. Mm-hmm. Now let's one of the agendas at the Speaker Summit was related to the question of labor. And if I look at the work done by our Parliament in the last couple of years when it comes to that question, we did a fair bit of legislation. So, for example, in the previous Parliament, we passed the maternity benefit bill, which doubled the amount of maternity leave. In the first session of this Parliament, we passed the wage code bill, which set a minimum floor wage, for minimum wage across the country. And currently, Parliament is in the process of considering another bill, which is going to set standards for working conditions and other such things, for the labor industry across the country. And that's not all. In the previous Parliament, I remember, the Prime Minister, in one of his replies to the President's address, had actually recommended that Parliament should be debating one of the issues related to Sustainable Development Goals in each session of Parliament. The office of the Speaker had also written to state legislators across the country, urging them to have discussions on Sustainable Development Goals. Now, to me, the idea for such a summit is not only for India and the Indian Parliament to share its learnings, but also put forth as to how Parliament as a deliberative and accountability institution is actually working on the issues of Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay, and then this particular forum, this particular summit gives an opportunity to lawmakers, senior lawmakers from all these nations to go ahead and interact with each other and share notes as to what exactly has been done. Let me bring in Shekhar here. Shekhar, the Malé Declaration, which was adopted at the end of this summit, clearly talks about 4 or 5 things. And if you look at, cursory look at this, says that, promoting equality at work, nutrition, food security, and also ensuring that, the agenda of Sustainable Development Goals is moved further ahead by taking on all the challenges, finding opportunities and solutions as well. So quite a lot to focus on out here.
Yeah, indeed. If you consider, ever since the UN General Assembly adopted this Sustainable Development Goals and set 2030 as the year where some amount of achievement should be there, concerning those 17 goals. We have seen our government, particularly our central government, has been working on several measures to remove poverty and ensure that there is growth, there is development, and opportunities are created to cater to all those sections that form part of these goals. So therefore, the idea of this kind of engaging speakers, parliament, your civil society, the NGOs, the whole idea is that this idea of the goals will permeate deeper, and there is a lot of synergy. And therefore, what we have seen is even this Mali declaration is itself to take the South Asia region itself as one region where poverty is an endemic problem, and challenges regarding whether sustainable livelihood, food, clean air, clean water. These are all goals, and often we have heard, even during SAARC summits, repeatedly, the call has been that we have to sink our political differences and focus on these goals. Now, the idea of a parliamentary forum itself engaging in this kind of interaction is the 17th goal of the sustainable goals. The 17th goal is to seek out this kind of partnership, to involve, so that you see when the speakers of all the parliament of the region meet, it means they are involving the members, the respective members. Therefore, the concern, because the basic thrust of this is no one is left out of development. This is the goal of that UN's Sustainable Development Goal. And that is same concept which our government, Modi government, has been talking of Antodaya, the last man on the queue, the person who stands at the last of the Qatar. He, everything is done to take care of him. So the whole, and incidentally, the India's role in this is very significant because we have made sufficient progress in terms of sustainable goals in our own way, and already our Prime Minister has kept 2022 as a cutoff date, when India celebrates 75 years of its independence. Lot of these goals see tangible results.
Okay, so several aspects of these goals which have been discussed is being tackled out there, and the idea behind that is to bring all these parliamentarians, those who make laws, to come and interact with each other. Let's bring in Mr. V.K. Agnihotri here. Mr. Agnihotri, you've been there at the helm of affairs in the upper house for quite a lot of time. So from your perspective and from your experiences as well, summits like these and issues like these important issues being debated at these summits, which are attended by lawmakers from all neighboring nations, how significant is that, and what purpose does it serve?
You see, long time ago it was realized that parliamentarians need a forum to discuss and deliberate on issues of common concern as well as shared experiences. So in 1889, Inter-Parliamentary Union, which has been referred to by Chakshu Roy, was constituted. But there is another body called Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, which came into existence in 1911. Now, apart from deliberating and discussing matters of common concern relating to conduct of business in the House, etc., etc., another level is that very often there are legislations which have international ramifications, and therefore the parliamentarians need to sensitize themselves about their implications. Actually, some countries require the executive to get the approval of their parliament for any international treaty to be signed. And at another level, there are the parliaments have two functions, two very important functions. One is oversight of the executive, and another is control over the budget. Now, for these reasons, some of the issues which are maybe concern of the executive need to be discussed and debated by the parliamentarians, so that when the matter comes up in the House or in the committees, they are fully aware of what is happening around them.
Okay.
And this SGD is one such matter. Actually, this SGD was preceded by MGP, MDG, Millennium Development Goals. And based on the experience of the international community on MDG, now these SDGs have come up, and it is a good, this regional conference is of course an offshoot of the Inter-Parliamentary Union.
Okay.
And therefore, I'm sure that this matter would have been discussed or is likely to be discussed in the next meeting of the IPU.
Okay. Okay. So clearly, this does have a lot of important ramifications as well. Chakshu, earlier you mentioned one aspect of the Sustainable Development Goals as well. That's labor. But the Malé Declaration also speaks about how the focus has to be on youth, equality, food security, nutrition for women and children as well. So all these aspects are clearly defining the entire, gamut of SDGs.
Vishal, I think, the idea of the declaration is for South Asian parliaments to put, speak in a unified voice on issues of common concern. Both Mr. Iyer and Mr. Agnihotri have alluded to that. I just wanted to highlight as to what are the kind of experiences that can be shared by the Indian Parliament, at forums like the IPU, which is the current forum, and the forum like the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association that Mr. Agnihotri was referring to.
And with respect to all these aspects, equality, women, youth, and all
Absolutely.
these legislations which have been formed by Indian Parliament.
Absolutely. So, for example, we are currently sitting in the Rajya Sabha, TV studio, and I see a number of my colleagues who are cameramen around us. One of the labor legislation that has been introduced in this session of Parliament covers, parity for cine workers, across the country. And for the longest time, that legislation only used to cover, cine workers in the films, part or in the Bollywood part of a thing. Our Parliament, through a rigorous scrutiny of legislation, so the Parliamentary Committee on Labour actually looked at that, legislation and said, oh, you know what, technology has evolved, television has evolved, and cine workers, the definition of cine workers when it comes to labour laws should not only include people who work in films, but should also include people who work, in web series or in television studios. And working conditions for them should be, at par for, all professions. So that is the kind of expertise, that is the kind of regular scrutiny, which the Indian Parliament would have championed. The other part of, what the Malé Declaration talks about is not only in terms of subject areas, but what can parliaments think about those subject areas. So, for example, when it comes to youth or malnutrition, the obvious question that arises is what is the kind of priority that the government, allocates to these areas when it comes to fiscal transfers, right? And fiscal transfers is something that comes squarely within the purview of Parliament. So when parliaments, either national parliaments or sub-national parliaments, are looking at issues, another lens that they can add to their scrutiny is the lens of SDG, and then question the executive and hold them to account and say, we are duty bound to adhere to some of these targets, and do these allocations reflect our intention for us to be able to achieve these targets. So for me, the Malé Declaration and the deliberation of the 2 days is a reflection of the common concern that parliaments have, and how can parliaments take those concerns forward irrespective of politics in their respective countries.
Okay, so common concerns to be taken care of. Let me bring in Shekhar here again. And Shekhar, definitely Sustainable Development Goals was the focus on the agenda out there. And the Malé Declaration clearly states as well the way forward from here onwards. But one more aspect of this particular summit, and a very important one, was how Indian delegation, which was present at the summit, which comprised of the Speaker of Lok Sabha, the Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, and the Secretary General of both houses and other officials as well, clearly and successfully thwarted an attempt by the Pakistani delegation to bring bilateral issues at forums like these. Now, such incidents have happened earlier as well. What can we do to ensure, in these summits, to ensure that these bilateral issues are not brought onto table on these forums? Rather, issues like SDG and several others which are on agenda should be the focus.
See, we have seen these attempts even at SAARC summit, and Pakistan particularly has been notorious for this kind of exercise. And even in SAARC, I see that is one of the reasons the SAARC summit have not been held regularly, because Pakistan is so desperate that it uses forums like this, which should be actually discussing the common challenge of poverty and sustainable development. And unfortunately, we saw Malé, the conference was also used for this, but as you mentioned, it was quickly rebutted by our Rajya Sabha Deputy Chairman, Harivansh Singh ji. And And his was a very point-by-point rebuttal. And he said, look, if you are going to talk about race issues like Kashmir, the question is, does Pakistan have that, I mean, what kind of moral right does it have to talk about when it had presided over a genocide in 1971 in Bangladesh? He mentioned that. And I do not know why a Pakistan National Assembly Deputy Speaker chose to use this forum, because already, you know, these are issues, there are forums available for this. We have seen it in UN Security Council. We have seen it in even when the General Assembly is held, UN General Assembly later this month. These are issues going to come. But somehow the tendency seems to be, particularly of the lawmakers from our neighboring country, not to realize the, you know, the seriousness of the deliberations. Because when you are talking of goals like this, no poverty, clean air, clean water, implementing the climate agreements.
And these are common goals.
No, these are common goals which affect lives of so many people. There is always another forum available to raise your political issues. And our consistent stand has been, look, if you want to raise issues like Kashmir, you have to do it at a bilateral level. We are not going to entertain. And so therefore the promptness in which Rajya Sabha Deputy Chairman completely, completely nullified the attempt only goes to show that India is not going to play this kind of game which Pakistan wants to.
Okay.
And because for the simple reason, the issues involved before a forum like this, a speakers conference from South Asian countries, there are much bigger issues. And you cannot allow these issues just for the sake of headline grabbing. And today I have seen the Pakistani newspapers, you know, they are using this forum as saying that, you know, Pakistan has scored a big point. This only shows the level of desperation when the issues related to these goals are very serious challenge in Pakistan.
Okay.
There are very serious challenges in Pakistan.
Vis-a-vis India, and
Yes.
they should go,
And the fundamental purpose of this kind of forum itself is how we can benefit from one another's experience.
and put our differences aside and work on these common goals.
India has that leadership in terms of capacity building, in terms of technology transfer, and also as in conveying its own experience in matters of governance.
Okay, clearly. Let me bring in Mr. Agnihotri here as well. Mr. Agnihotri, similar question to you as well. You know, bilateral issues or issues like these being raised as these forums clearly derail the entire, summit or the entire conference, and that, main goal of discussing the common issues and putting our differences aside and focusing on much larger issues is then completely moved away.
Yes, I totally agree. You see, in all these kind of events, there is an agenda. And the participants to the discussion are expected to stick to the agenda and talk on that. You see, all these are parliamentarians, and even parliament runs on the basis of a list of business, which is put forward in advance. And then the speakers, the various members of parliament speak on those matters. Of course, we have a unique tradition of 0 hour. But even for 0 hour, the member has to give advance notice, and then the chairman or the speaker has to agree that these matters will be taken up. And if anything is being raised in the House which is not part of the deliberation or discussion, then there are two ways out. One, the speaker keeps on doing all the time and chairman keep on doing all the time. They say nothing will go on record. Other thing is to switch off the mic. That is also done sometimes. That whatever the speaker is speaking, if it is not to the point and doesn't conform to the agenda, then he should not be allowed to speak. And perhaps in convening these meetings, one of the items for the speakers to observe should be this, that they should not speak outside the agenda, and if they do, it will not go on record and their mic will be switched off.
Okay, clearly. So that can be one way out. Chakshu, your views on how to go ahead and deal with situations like these?
Vishal, I think, appropriate discussions at appropriate forums is the cornerstone for any parliamentary democracy. And when, participating members at an international forum violate the sacrosanct, the sanctity of discussion, then I think it leaves a bad taste not only in the participants and the participating nations, but also it kind of leads a bad taste in terms of interpersonal, backroom talks that parliamentarians are supposed to exhibit at these occasions. Both Mr. Agnihotri and Mr. Iyer really summed up as to what was the response of the Indian delegation. I just wanted to conclude by saying that, the response was appropriate. I remember at a previous occasion in the last Lok Sabha, the forum was CPA, where again the Kashmir issue was raised. And the Indian delegation was very, politely and eruditely was able to put their point across. I think the learning for us from these delegations should not be the aberration of a bilateral issue raised, but the learning should be, and our attempts should be, more to strengthen our ties with our neighboring parliamentarians, including Pakistan, learn the best practices of what is being done there when it comes to SDGs, and also communicate to these parliaments as to the amount of work that the Indian Parliament is initiating and actually conducting in its two houses on such issues.
Okay, so clearly the idea is to learn more about each other's work. From here onwards, Shekhar, to conclude it, how do you see forums like these, summits like these, contributing much to better legislations being framed, being debated in parliaments across not only these nations, but maybe some of those who didn't even participate in summits like these?
Yeah, indeed. You see, a forum like this, a South Asian forum, gives an opportunity to actually look at the commonalities of the problems faced by them. The challenges are so common. Now, poverty, whether it is in Pakistan or India or Nepal or Sri Lanka, for the best part of it, there are very common issues and common, I would say, parameters to deal with. And they can share their experience. And actually, this is a forum to share the best practices, because we have seen when you can learn from one another, why not use this forum for sharing your experience and learning from others, whether it's drinking water, whether it's food security, whether it is housing for all, whether it's clean drinking water, whether it's piped water, or power, 24/7 power electricity, because these are essentials for a progress of any country, particularly a country that is there in the South Asian region. I think, therefore, unfortunately, of course, the headline is what happened yesterday, but I am sure from the deliberations, particularly those who went for this conference are all either the chairpersons of or presiding officers,
or deputy presiding officers,
and in fact some of the MPs have gone. Say Pakistan had its senator there. So therefore, I think it would do well if all the countries agree that let's not bring politics where we need to discuss serious economical issues.
Okay, clearly. Mr. Agnihotri, concluding comments from you. The focus should be on the common agenda.
Yes, definitely. As a matter of fact, it will not only help better legislation, but more importantly, it will help better deliberation whenever the executive brings in a legislation or brings in any matter, or whenever a debate takes place on some issue which is of concern to the nation. Then participation in such fora provides an opportunity for the participants, because here, of course, apart from the speakers, the MPs were not there, but in larger meetings of the IPU and CPA, the speakers, the members of parliament also participate. So their participation and, of course, their access of everyone to the deliberations will help them in raising the quality of deliberations in the House.
Okay.
That is also an area that we have to look into.
Okay, so clearly there it is. Thank you so much, Mr. Agnihotri, Chakshu and Shekhar here as well for sharing your views with us. As our panelists pointed out, clearly the focus of summits like this should be on trying to find solution to common problems. And that is exactly what seems to have happened at the 4th South Asian Speakers Summit as well, to try and learn from each other's experiences and find ways to make better legislations in their respective nations. We'll come back again tomorrow with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.